Welcome back. Town Hall Showdown. Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley were on CNN last night for their last town hall appearances before the Iowa Caucuses on January 15th and their scheduled debate on CNN on January 10th. The candidates corrected mistakes, made policy stances, and went after Trump like never before. We'll take a look at what each of them said, whether or not they move the needle, and how this alters the dynamics before their debate next week. We'll be taking a look at those stories and more today, January 5th, 2023. From Ishaan Media, this is the Ishaan S Show, a podcast about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics. With me, your host, Ishaan. Hello. Welcome back to the Ishaan S Show. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to make an announcement that we are, interestingly enough, I mean, you might find it interesting, but we are on a YouTube now. YouTube is a new medium I've decided to enter, and I think actually some of you may be listening to this on YouTube. It's been something people have talked about for a while and the conversations I've had with people, but I've just never been so open to the idea until recently when I realized that maybe as we enter into an election year, a presidential election year on top of that, that we should start venturing into things and start looking at stuff that could be more enticing for you as listeners and now as viewers, and give a more visual aspect to what it is that I do here. So those YouTube videos, I don't have a set schedule for them. It's just going to be more like episodes when I want them to come out, videos that are going to have some sort of analysis. Like there's something that's already live on the channel. It's about the 10 Senate seats most likely to flip, based on CNN's list that they posted. And I put in my own predictions and what I thought. So it's going to be those types of videos where there's going to be a nice map to accompany it. Maybe we'll do graphics. And I know especially when we hit elections, when we start having elections, like actual elections, i.e. in less than 2 weeks now with the Iowa Caucuses, I'm going to be posting graphics up there. And there may be live broadcasts. I don't know. I don't know how any of this works. I'm looking into it. I'm exploring stuff. But just wanted to put that on your radar. Okay. But I want to get into today's episode. You can check out YouTube and subscribe, I guess now I can say. But yes, I wanted to talk about today's episode, which was about CNN's town hall. And it's interesting that whole spiel that we just watched, because again, the same thing has continued has persisted over and over, that Donald Trump is running away with this nomination and the candidates are really not that important, except for your second place candidates, and those are Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. These two candidates have been really trying to make a name for themselves, even though they know very well themselves that Trump is really just gonna win this nomination, unless of course things become really bad for him, which I couldn't even imagine happening anymore, because now that we are now that we're only 10 days away from the Iowa caucuses and Trump is only going up, I don't know what these candidates are really thinking anymore, because honestly, if you're running for president, you have to be smart enough to make that decision that maybe you do not have a viable path, but that's okay. CNN needs their views, so they invited these candidates on for a town hall, so they do what they need to do, and these candidates want to put their name out there, so they got on. So we had two town halls on CNN. The first one, it was back-to-back, and they don't usually do that there. So the first one was Ron DeSantis, and that was moderated by Caitlin Collins. We talked about Caitlin Collins earlier because she moderated the Trump town hall that happened a few months back, and I know we talked about that. And then the second one was right after. It was moderated by Aaron Burnett, and that one was with Nikki Haley. So my overall notes from the night was it was pretty unremarkable in the sense that I was not particularly inspired, and I don't think any viewer made up their mind after this town hall. And I think it's just because of the format because the candidate is by themselves. They have more time. I just think it would be better if they were standing against each other on a stage, going at it with these questions, because the questions were actually, to CNN's credit, pretty good, and they were asking the right things. It's just, if they're not against each other, you don't hear the dueling claims, and not everyone is going to watch all 2 hours. Not everyone is as crazy as I am to sit through 2 hours of CNN to watch town halls. But so you want to hear both of them go against each other and see the clear differences. But the notes that I was getting, and when I was watching the analysis, the general trend that I was getting was that Ron DeSantis had a good night. He was actually pretty good. He tapped into this weird, relatable side that we haven't seen. I know people love making fun of his weird smile and everything, and how he sometimes acts super robotic. But this time we actually saw him doing something that we've yet to see from him, which was be relatable and be a little more human on the campaign trail. He's making these personal anecdotes and these connections with the things that voters are saying. He's way more coherent in the sense that he's actually articulating his policy in a way that distinguishes himself from Trump, but Haley as well. And I think that was really good for him. It's just, I wish he would have done it sooner. If I was an advisor of his, I wish he would have done this in August or October, September, November, December. 10 days before the Iowa caucuses is just not when you should be making this sort of change. It's a good change, but just a good change too late. As for Nikki Haley, Haley was her usual self. I mean, I've said it repeatedly for months now. Haley is a very calm and composed candidate, and she's very smart when she speaks. She has this talent. She has this really nice emotional quotient level. So here, when we're giving Ron DeSantis a pat on the back for sounding somewhat relatable, Nikki Haley is actually really good at doing that retail politics thing. So she actually just was doing 10 times better than Ron DeSantis, but it wasn't remarkable for her. It's nothing different than what we've seen. But from the night, I think if we were to look at a few things, I'm using CNN's analysis, what they posted an article, and they talked about what they thought the candidates were, how you could rate the night. So the first thing that they said is that the candidates set expectations. What they mean when they say that is that they tried to set themselves up for success in the elections, because everybody knows that Donald Trump is leading by 40 points, 50 points, 60 points. In Iowa, it's a pretty big margin. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they set expectations. They said, okay, we may not win first place, guys, in Iowa. Let's be real here. But they also said that they're not running off of the poll numbers. They're living by this fallacy that somehow Donald Trump is not winning by as much as he says he is. So I don't know. I just think it's worth questioning whether or not that's true, because you cannot, after a certain point, I just don't understand where these people would think that Donald Trump is not running away with this nomination. When you lead by 60 points, you are just a strong candidate, period. These candidates, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, think that somehow there is not, that Trump's support is being inflated. It's not. I think it doesn't, I don't know. I just don't think it's true that Trump is really doing worse than they say he is. Maybe he'll lose a couple of points here and there, but whatever. They said that they're going to set expectations, and that's what I think my views are. But what I found more interesting, and we're going to play a few clips from the night here now, is DeSantis and Haley taking on Trump. These two were far more forceful against Trump. And like DeSantis's relatable emotionalness that we saw last night that I was praising him for, this is what we wanted to see this whole campaign. This is what, political pundits and political viewers like myself, we've been waiting for this. Go after Donald Trump. Attack Donald Trump. You're running against him. And not to say that they actually full-blown attack Donald Trump, because they still haven't done that yet. But they did take him on. They challenged him on a few things. Ron DeSantis was talking about how Trump can't. He was essentially insinuating that Trump couldn't win in a general election because of January 6th, that he couldn't win because of Democrats not liking him, that Democrats would want Trump. Take a listen to this clip of Ron DeSantis talking about Trump.
Primary, do you think that he's leading in this race because of his indictments?
So look, I mean, there's things that happen when you're running. There's things you can control. I can control how I answer your questions. I can control how hard I'm going to work. Like I've chosen to do the 99 counties. Other candidates haven't. There's other things you can't control. How these things happen, how they're played in the media, all this other stuff. Clearly, it's had an impact. But what I would tell primary voters is whatever may be beneficial in the primary doesn't mean it's beneficial in the general election. And I think a 2024 election where the Democrats get to run against a candidate that is going through all this stuff, that is going to give the Democrats an advantage. Don't have to agree with any of the stuff that was done. That's just the reality. And we end up in a situation where we're putting the future of the Republican Party and the future of the nation, perhaps, in the hands of 12 jurors in heavily Democrat D.C., which is likely to be a very stacked left-wing jury, that if they somehow convict, then the Democrats are going to win the election. Why do we want to even go down that road? Let's focus on your issues. Let's focus on Biden's failure.
And then Nikki Haley also went after Donald Trump. We've heard this line before from her, like, we have a country to save, and chaos seems to follow him, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's the same thing we're used to listening to. So let's listen to Nikki Haley as well.
Talk about where this is. I personally think President Trump was the right president at the right time. I agree with a lot of his policies. But the reality is, rightly or wrongly, chaos follows him. And we all know that's true. Chaos follows him. And we can't have a country in disarray and a world on fire and go through 4 more years of chaos. We won't survive it. And you don't defeat Democrat chaos with Republican chaos.
Is it rightly or wrongly? Is he the one who causes that chaos, or is he just the unwitting victim?
It's both. I mean, you see a lot of these cases they've brought against him are political in nature. And there's no basis on it. And then you see some that he's going to have to answer for. But look, I'm not telling you anything I used to tell him. I used to tell him he's his own worst enemy. And so I think at the end of the day, we don't need anyone who's getting in their feelings. We don't need anyone that's getting personal about anything. We have a country to save. And that means no more drama. No more taking things personally. I mean, you look at the situation, the differences I have with him is, first of all, I'm an accountant. We have got to get our economy back on track. And everybody wants to talk about the economy they had under Trump. But at what cost? At what cost? $8 trillion in 4 years. Our kids will never forgive us for that. We are having to dig out of it. So you may have had a good 4 years, but look at what we're paying for now. As of now, in a couple of years, we'll be paying more money in interest payments than we are in our defense budget. You know who notices that? Russia, China, and Iran. That's what happens there. The second thing is you look at how he deals with dictators. I think it's completely wrong. He praised China's President Xi 12 times after China gave us COVID. You don't do that. He congratulated them on the 70th anniversary of the Communist Party. We don't do that. When Israel fell to her knees, you're going to go pick a fight with Israel's prime minister because of some issue, personal issue you had with him before, and you're going to praise Hezbollah? It's just not what we need to do. We need to do this without emotion. We need to do this with a sane sense of how we're going to take America forward.
I think this strategy of going after Trump the way they have just last night is something they should have done sooner. Because if they really, like, the reason they're doing this now, I get why they're doing it now, is because they want to turn out voters that are anti-Trump but are also not voting in the primary. Like, they want to mobilize those Republicans to come out and caucus for them and vote for them in New Hampshire. But it's just too late. If they took this strategy earlier, it wouldn't have hurt them, because the point that what the point that should be made is they shouldn't have been scared to go after Trump if they're running against him. They've already hired people by running against him in the first place, so it doesn't matter. Like, there wasn't a lot of ground that they were saving by not attacking Trump. So I think it was just really unwise for both of them to be resorting to this strategy so late in the game. But whatever. Then even DeSantis also got a praise the same way I've been praising him today. CNN also wanted to praise him for his evolution. Like, he's started talking about how he is relatable. Like, when he started off the night, he came in with starting to like try to be friends with the moderator Caitlin Collins. They were talking about basketball. He was trying to be all relatable, and I was watching when voters would ask him questions. He would, I think, with like if he was asked 10 questions, I'd say 8 out of 10 of those questions he tried to make a personal anecdote and relate to each of them. It seemed a little, inorganic, and it seemed a little rehearsed, but it's okay. It's progress for Ron DeSantis, I guess, especially with his weird smile like that too. But he is doing a better job, I'd say, of trying to come across as this more approachable type of candidate. It's something he's struggled with through this whole campaign. So he is trying to make inroads there. So I'd say good for him. Then Haley got in a little trouble. So this is what they've been talking about. Haley has been in the news lately for a bunch of gaffes that she's made, and it's not been that good for her. So her first gaffe that she made was about the Civil War. In New Hampshire, in a town hall, she was asked by a voter what she thought started the Civil War. And she kind of just glossed over. No, not even glossed over. She came under a lot of scrutiny for not even mentioning the word slavery as a reason. And come on, you have to be informed enough to know that slavery is the leading cause of the Civil War, and that's what drove so much of what happened. Yet Haley, in her answer, did not even mention slavery. Take a listen to her initial response from a few weeks ago.
What was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do.
And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you answer that question without mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was a bit of an oopsie on Nikki Haley's part, that she was not very smart with her words. And then she was asked about it on stage. But before I played that clip, I also want to talk about the other gaffe that she had, which was basically in New Hampshire the other day. She came under fire for saying that Iowa picks, Iowa votes, and then New Hampshire votes for a candidate or caucuses, and then New Hampshire corrects it. Like, she was kind of insinuating that Iowa voters are not like picking the right candidate and that New Hampshire needs to correct them. It comes from a famous line that comes mocking Iowa. Iowa picks corn, New Hampshire picks presidents. That was a bit of a controversial gaffe, I would say, of Nikki Haley's, that she probably wishes she addressed better, but she kind of tried to walk back on that comment, saying, "Oh, I accidentally said that us early states," because she's from South Carolina, which is also an early state. She's like, us early states like to joke around a lot. We're like that. We're tight. She kind of tried to walk it off. I thought it was a good answer, but when I was watching the analysis, people did not seem to like that answer. They thought it was a little boring and did not actually attack the substance. So I'm going to play the slavery answer, and then I'm going to play the actually, no, I will not play that answer. But so quickly, as a quick reminder, for the slavery answer, she was in trouble for saying that slavery was not a cause, like she did not mention slavery as a cause for the Civil War. So here's Nikki Haley trying to clean up those comments at the town hall last night.
I should have said slavery right off the bat. But if you grow up in South Carolina, literally in second and third grade, you learn about slavery. You grow up and you have, I had black friends growing up. It is a very talked about thing. We have a big history in South Carolina. So when you talk about slavery, it was not just slavery that was talked about. It was more about racism that was talked about. It was more about, we had friends, we had black friends, we had white friends, but it was always a topic of conversation.
And then lastly, I think one of the more notable things from the night was Ron DeSantis attacking Donald Trump's stance on abortion. I thought that this was weirdly interesting because the way he attacked Donald Trump was he was basically saying that Donald Trump is not pro-life enough. And if you're a Republican candidate in an Iowa caucus, saying that your opponent is not pro-life is just about the worst thing you could say about them in a Republican primary. So it's a pretty big allegation that DeSantis was putting on Trump. And Trump has so far campaigned on this platform that he picked 3 Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. Of course he's pro-life. But DeSantis wanted to move away from that because of Trump's lack of a stance. Like, Trump has been asked repeatedly on his stance on abortion, and he's not actually given us a real decent answer, if that makes sense. Like, we've not gotten any clear direction of what his views are on the issue. And so I think that's what DeSantis is going at, is that it makes him a more unpredictable candidate in the general election and then as a president. So DeSantis tried to soften his tone on abortion because I think maybe he's starting to recognize that it's a losing issue for Republicans. I don't know. But it's not, I don't know. I thought this attack came short. But here is Ron DeSantis attacking Trump's stance on abortion.
Do you think Donald Trump is not pro-life?
Of course not. I mean, when you're saying that pro-life protections are a terrible thing, by definition, you are not pro-life. When you say that you want to have a federal law at 18 weeks or 20 weeks that would override a state like Iowa that has enacted pro-life protections, that would mean more abortions, not less abortions, because very few abortions are happening that late anyways. So he has flip-flopped on this issue. I don't know if it's because of political convenience or this is all where he always believed in. But here's the thing. Some issues are pretty fundamental. How do you flip-flop on something like the sanctity of life?
And like I said, in an Iowa caucus, if you're attacking your candidate for the opponent for not being pro-life, it's about the worst thing you could say about a fellow Republican in a caucus or in a primary like that. But anyway, that was the overall town halls. I know I didn't play a lot of clips, and this episode hasn't gone on very long, but that's just kind of the theme of these two candidates. They're not remarkable. They're not groundbreaking because it's not even their fault. Like, in any normal primary, I feel like Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis would actually be really strong candidates in a primary. It'd be an intense fight, but it would be one worth watching, and they would be good candidates in a general election. Maybe not as much Ron DeSantis, but still, like, they are good, decent candidates. It's just they're so sidelined because Trump is running. It's not... it makes sense for someone like Nikki Haley to maybe jump in right now because it's been 4 years since she's been in office, and so 4 years since she's been in the headlines, she might be a little distanced if she were to run in 2028. Ron DeSantis, though, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that he's making this decision to run, and it only comes to harm him, honestly, these two candidates. And I get that they have some sort of faith in their ability to run this campaign, but I just don't see a bright future for them. I don't think that they have this path ahead to the nomination, unless, of course, something seismic happens and suddenly these two are the only candidates running. I just don't understand how they think that Donald Trump is going to somehow get beat. New Hampshire is like the best bet of anybody beating Trump, because it was in a poll that came out recently. Trump was beating Haley by only 4 points, but both of them gained ground. So, like, Haley went from 29% to 33%, and Trump went from 33% to 37%. So they still maintained that 4-point gap. But it's like, okay, that's a pretty close margin, but that's it. That's the only state where anything good is happening for any of the remaining candidates. Vivek Ramaswamy, haven't even talked about him today. He's like on the verge of dropping out. Not saying more than that. Chris Christie, he's like, yeah, okay, like he wasn't invited to this town hall, but neither was he invited to the Iowa debate next week. And he's like, it's fine, because I'm not campaigning in Iowa, so like I don't care. Like that's his attitude. So that's the Republican primary right now. I'm guessing next week we're going to talk about the Republican debate that's going to happen on Wednesday. But again, it's American politics, so you never know what you're discussing. Trump could be off the ballot again or something, or we might be talking about a new fiscal bill that may be an issue. Who knows? So yeah, follow us on Instagram, Threads, and follow us on every other social media platform. Subscribe to the Political News Blog. And subscribe on YouTube now. If you're listening to this on YouTube, thank you for your support. And I'll see you guys next week. Or if you're on YouTube, I'll see you guys eventually. Take care.